From AIHI Books comes another tale, End of Time, a gentle exploration of soft science fiction.
End of Time, Chapter 1. The sun dipped low over Willow Park, its golden rays slicing through the late afternoon haze, painting the sprawling green with warm streaks. Laughter and the occasional shout echoed across the field, blending with the rustle of leaves stirred by a steady breeze. 11-year-old Eli Carter gripped the string of his homemade kite, a lopsided creation stitched from old bed sheets and reinforced with duct tape. Its edges sagged unevenly, one wing drooping lower than the other, a testament to his morning's improvisation. From the start, he'd had to fight to keep it aloft, his small hands deftly adjusting the line with the skill honed from years of kite-flying practice. The kite wobbled and dipped, threatening to crash, but Eli's persistence held it steady against the capricious wind. Around him, the park buzzed with kite flyers, kids and adults alike, their crisp, store-bought designs cutting elegant arcs through the air. A teenage girl nearby maneuvered a sleek red kite with practiced ease, while an older man adjusted the lines of a blue Delta kite, its sharp angles catching the light. Then, without warning, chaos broke loose. The red kite veered wildly, its string tangling as the girl stumbled back with a startled yelp. The blue Delta followed, looping erratically before dipping toward the grass, its owner cursing under his breath. One by one, the symmetrical flyers lost control, their spins growing frantic as if seized by an invisible tempest. That's when Eli noticed a shift. The effort he'd poured into keeping his kite aloft vanished. Suddenly it soared straight with no resistance, cutting through the air with uncanny poise despite its crooked shape. Grinning, he fished a strip of tape from his pocket and ripped off a chunk of fabric, deliberately skewing the kite further. The result was a wobbling absurdity to anyone else's eyes, lopsided and chaotic, yet it flew straighter than ever, defying the turmoil around it. Whatever was at play, it spared his asymmetrical oddity now that the other kites had begun to falter. "Dad!" Eli called, his voice cutting through the din. He spotted his father, Mr. Carter, a lanky figure with wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, sitting on a weathered bench with a dog-eared math textbook. A middle school teacher known for turning fractions into life lessons, Mr. Carter looked up, his brow creasing as he took in the scene. Eli dashed over, kite string clutched tightly. "Look at this! My kite's the only one working right!" Mr. Carter set the book aside, standing to inspect the kite. He ran a hand along its uneven frame, then scanned the park where kites spun like tops. "That's highly unusual," he murmured, his teacher's mind already whirring. "The symmetry of those designs should give them stability. This suggests something's interfering, maybe the wind patterns, or—" He trailed off, then met Eli's gaze. "Let's test it. Try making it symmetric, son. See what happens." Eli frowned but nodded, trusting his father's logic. Together, they tore off the uneven bits, reshaping the kite into a neat, balanced diamond. The fabric stretched taut, its lines now mirroring each other perfectly. They relaunched it, the breeze catching it with a promising lift. For a fleeting moment, it held steadily, then it faltered, buckling midair. With a sharp dip, it spun out of control, crashing into the grass like the others. Mr. Carter knelt beside the wreckage, his expression darkening. "That's no coincidence. Symmetry's the foundation of aerodynamics, and something's unraveling it." He pulled out his phone, snapping a photo of the fallen kite, then the chaotic sky above. "We need to analyze this. Let's head home and plot the wind vectors, maybe run some calculations. This could be bigger than we think." As they gathered their things, a ripple of unease passed through the park. The other flyers exchanged bewildered glances, some abandoning their kites entirely. Eli felt a chill crawl up his spine despite the warm air. The sky looked clear, unmarred by clouds or strange lights, yet the air seemed to hum with an unseen presence. He glanced at his father, who was already muttering about torque and drag, his mind racing with equations. On their way to the car, a park ranger approached, tipping his hat in acknowledgement. "Folks are leaving their kites all over the ground again," he grumbled, shaking his head as he surveyed the littered field. He moved on without a second glance, his radio crackling faintly. In the car, Eli clutched the kite's broken frame, his mind buzzing. As Mr. Carter turned on the radio, a meteorologist's voice broke through the static. For the first time in my lifetime, I have to report an unprecedented anomaly. The tide is the same in all the cities I cover. Normally it's high in some areas and low in others, vice versa. I've consulted colleagues in distant cities, and they're all reporting the same. High tides, rising steadily. The broadcast shifted to a news anchor, her tone urgent. It didn't take long for some outlets to weigh in. The Chronicle claims this is a sure sign of global warming in action. With these rising high tides, cities will soon be underwater, they report. We must act now. It's election season, and the left, long known for their advocacy against global warming, isn't letting this moment slip by. Party leaders are already calling for emergency climate measures, framing the anomaly as proof of their warnings. Dad, what if it's not the wind? What if it's something else? Eli asked, his voice trembling. Mr. Carter didn't answer immediately, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. Let's hope it's just a freak gust, he said finally. But if it's not, we'll need more than math to figure it out. As they drove away, the park receded behind them, the hum in the air growing fainter, but never fully fading. When they arrived home, father and son went straight to their basement lab, a cluttered space filled with charts, old textbooks, and a workbench strewn with tools. Mr. Carter pulled his weathered notebook from a drawer, its pages marked with years of scribbled equations. Before we forget too much, he said, flipping to a blank page, let's jot down what we observed. They worked together, Eli recalling the details as his father wrote. There were about a dozen kites with trouble, Eli began. Most were medium-sized, maybe 2 to 3 feet wide. The tails varied. Some had long ones, about 4 or 5 feet, others shorter, around 2 feet. Mr. Carter nodded, scribbling notes. And the direction they circled down, Eli added, they all went counterclockwise. Mr. Carter paused, tapping his pen. That's significant, Eli. A consistent counterclockwise spin suggests a uniform force acting on them, something beyond random wind. It could imply a rotational influence, maybe tied to the atmosphere or even something gravitational. He underlined the observation, then looked at Eli. Anything else? They thought for a moment. The air felt weird, Eli said, like it was buzzing, and the kites stopped making their usual humming sound when they started spinning. Mr. Carter jotted that down, though he added a question mark. Might not be necessary for our amateur research, but it's worth noting, he said. We'll start with the basics, symmetry and spin, and see where it leads. As they pored over the notes, the hum from the park seemed to echo faintly in Eli's mind, a mystery deepening with every word. Chapter 2. Morning dawned with an uneasy stillness in the Carter household, the events at Willow Park lingering like a stubborn fog. Eli woke to his father's voice drifting from the kitchen, where Mr. Carter sat hunched over his laptop, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. The world outside buzzed with frenetic energy, spilling across every screen and speaker. Eli shuffled in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, as the kitchen radio blared a news report. The tidal anomaly has escalated overnight, the anchor announced, her voice tight with urgency. High tides are now uniform across the globe. Every coastal city, from Miami to Mumbai, is reporting unprecedented water levels, rising steadily. International press is in a frenzy, with debates raging over the cause. Eli glanced at the laptop screen, where social media feeds scrolled endlessly. Hashtags like Global Tide Crisis and Rising Waters trended worldwide, alongside posts ranging from panicked rants to shaky videos of waves lapping at city streets. Mr. Carter adjusted his glasses, his brow furrowed as he scanned an article from a British outlet. The Guardian is calling it the most alarming climate event in decades, he muttered. They're saying it's proof of global warming's acceleration, polar ice melting faster than predicted, disrupting tidal patterns. He scrolled further, revealing a French headline echoing the same sentiment, followed by a Japanese broadcast showing flooded docks in Tokyo. The global warming panic had taken root, sinking its claws into leaders and citizens alike. In New York, the mayor announced emergency measures for low-lying areas. In Amsterdam, engineers scrambled to reinforce dikes, their faces grim on live feeds. Yet the earth had seen warmings and coolings long before factories or cars had been around. Natural cycles, such as the medieval warm period, when Vikings farmed in Greenland, or the Little Ice Age when rivers froze across Europe. These shifts, driven by the sun, volcanoes, or Earth's orbit, had nothing to do with human activity. Could the current anomalies be part of a similar cycle or something else entirely? Mr. Carter opened his X account, his follower count a modest 142, and typed a post. Tides are rising, but Earth has seen warmings and coolings before industrialization. Medieval warm period, Little Ice Age. Are we ignoring natural cycles? #tide crisis, check the facts. He hit send, watching as the post garnered a mere 23 views, a drop in the ocean amidst the tidal wave of hysteria. Not one to give up easily, he replied to comments from prominent anchors on both political sides, names he followed for their influence, like Anchor Left and Anchor Right, pointing out historical climate cycles with links to paleoclimate data. He cross-posted on other platforms, tagging meteorologists and pundits, but his efforts vanished into the digital void. No retweets, no likes, no acknowledgement. The narrative had already solidified, and a middle school teacher's logic was drowned out by the louder voices of panic. Eli pulled a chair closer, peering at the screen. "What are people saying online?" he asked. Mr. Carter switched tabs, revealing a flood of posts on X. A user in Florida wrote, "Tides up to my doorstep, selling the house before it's underwater. Global warming tide crisis." Another in California shared a photo of a beach swallowed by waves, captioned, "This isn't normal. We're doomed if we don't act now." The panic was palpable, a shared dread that rippled through every comment and retweet. Some users clung to denial, insisting it was a temporary anomaly, but they were drowned out by the chorus of fear. The television flickered to life as Mr. Carter switched to a news channel where a meteorologist with tired eyes faced a barrage of questions. "We've never seen anything like this," she said, her voice steady but strained. "Tides are typically influenced by the moon's gravity, the sun's pull, and the Earth's rotation, which shifts tidal bulges as the planet spins, creating high and low tides twice daily in most regions. But this uniformity, high tides everywhere, rising steadily, defies all known patterns. I can't confirm it's global warming, there's no data to support that yet, but the rising levels are undeniable." Then, as if unable to resist, she added, "Practically speaking, this anomaly aligns with the impacts we expect from global warming." Mr. Carter's hand slammed the table, startling Eli. "Aligns with global warming. That's absurd," he snapped, his voice sharp with frustration. In his mind, the tide event was just a symptom, like a fever, no pun intended. Not all fevers are caused by pneumonia. Several conditions can manifest as fever, including infections and inflammation. The uniform tides could stem from any number of causes, including a gravitational anomaly, an atmospheric disturbance, or something beyond current scientific understanding, rather than being attributed solely to global warming. He shook his head, muttering, "They're jumping to conclusions without evidence. It's like diagnosing every illness as the same disease." Eli's eyes widened at his father's outburst, but he stayed quiet, sensing the weight of his words. The television droned on, a pundit now shouting over his co-host, "This is what we've warned about for years. The climate crisis is here, and we're out of time." Eli's stomach knotted as he thought of their own home, just a few miles from the coast. "Dad, are we too close to the water?" he asked quietly. Mr. Carter hesitated, then shook his head, his anger softening. "We're on higher ground, Eli. We'll be fine for now, but others—" He trailed off, his gaze returning to the screen, where a report showed families in a coastal town packing their belongings, their faces etched with fear. The idea of selling homes near water had spread like wildfire. Real estate listings surged overnight, with desperate sellers slashing prices to escape the encroaching threat. Mr. Carter closed the laptop with a sigh, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "The world's losing its mind over global warming, but I can't shake what we saw at the park," he said, tapping the notebook from their basement lab session. "The kites, the counterclockwise spins, the symmetry effect, it's too specific to be climate-related. Natural cycles have shaped the Earth for millennia. What if this is something else, mimicking those patterns?" He looked at Eli, his eyes resolute. "We need to dig deeper." Eli nodded, his mind racing back to the park, the buzzing air, and the strange behavior of his kite. The world might be fixated on tides and warming, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the answer lay elsewhere. something far stranger than melting ice. Chapter 3. A week had passed since the kite spun out of control in Willow Park, and the world had only grown louder with panic. The Carter household's basement lab was a fortress of quiet rebellion against the global clamor. The stratus clouds, flat and gray with their eerie central curvature, had dominated the skies since the day after the kite incident, a phenomenon Mr. Carter had been the first to document. He'd noticed it in the backyard with his weathered notebook, sketching the cloud's unnatural arc, a lens-like bow that seemed to watch the earth below. Now, 7 days later, those clouds hadn't budged, and Mr. Carter was determined to make the world listen. Eli sat at the workbench, sorting through kite fragments, while his father typed furiously on his laptop, the glow illuminating his wire-rimmed glasses. Mr. Carter's mind churned with frustration, not just at the world's fixation on global warming, but at his own constraints. He wished he didn't have to go to work, where his days were spent wrangling middle schoolers through fractions and algebra. Most of his students had no taste for math or science, their eyes glazing over at equations or experiments. Some, it seemed, came to school as a substitute for a free teenage babysitting service, dropped off by parents who saw it as a way to keep them occupied. He longed to devote every hour to researching the anomalies, the kites, the tides, the clouds, but he had no choice. Bills had to be paid, and his modest teacher's salary was the family's lifeline. Still, the basement lab was his sanctuary, and today he'd carve out time to dig deeper. The radio in the corner buzzed with a seminar announcement. Dr. Marcus Lee hosts Stratus Crisis, Climate Collapse in Real Time, live from London. The global warmists, as Mr. Carter called them, had latched onto the clouds as irrefutable proof of human-driven overheating, ignoring the Earth's history of natural climate cycles, warm periods like the medieval warm period, when vineyards thrived in England, and cold spells like the Little Ice Age, when the Thames froze solid. Mr. Carter's frustration had grown with each broadcast, but he wasn't one to sit idle. "Eli, pass me the notebook," he said, not looking up. Eli slid the worn book across the table, its pages filled with sketches of the clouds, wind vector graphs, and notes on the kite incident. Mr. Carter flipped to a new page, jotting down the latest readings from his frequency detector, a homemade device of copper coils and blinking LEDs that had picked up faint, high-frequency pulses from the sky since the kites faltered. "These clouds aren't just a weather anomaly," he muttered. "That curvature, it's too precise, like it's engineered. And it's tied to whatever's messing with the kites and tides, maybe something mimicking the natural cycles we've seen before." Eli nodded, his 11-year-old mind racing. "Are you going to tell people about it? Like more than just X?" Mr. Carter paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He'd started small, posting his observations on X the day after the kite incident. With his modest 142 followers, he'd shared a photo of the stratus clouds, captioned, "Uniform stratus clouds with central curvature, not natural. Earth's had warmings and coolings before humans, like the Little Ice Age. Is this a new cycle or something else? #Tide Crisis Cloud Anomaly." The post had garnered 47 views, a handful of likes, and a single reply from a local meteorology enthusiast, @WeatherNerd42. "Interesting. Got data to back it up?" Mr. Carter had replied with a link to a paleoclimate dataset on historical cycles, but the conversation fizzled. The world was too busy panicking about rising tides and climate doom to notice a middle school teacher's musing. Undeterred, he'd spent the week escalating his efforts. He'd emailed a detailed report to local meteorologists, including the Willow Park Ranger Station's weather contact, attaching his sketches and frequency readings. The cloud's curvature suggests an external influence, possibly tied to the tidal anomaly and kite behavior, perhaps mimicking natural climate cycles, he'd written, keeping his tone measured but urgent. The ranger station sent a polite auto-reply, promising to review. 2 meteorologists didn't respond at all. A third dismissed him as an amateur with no credentials. He'd broadened his reach, posting in online forums like WeatherWatch and Science Hub, where amateur researchers traded ideas. He uploaded his cloud sketches and detector data, framing them as a hypothesis, Could an atmospheric signal be altering cloud formation, kite aerodynamics, and tidal patterns like natural cycles of the past? A few users engaged, but most threads were overshadowed by debates on climate change. He'd taken a bolder step, contacting a local news outlet, the Willow Chronicle, with a pitch for a story. Unexplained cloud patterns point to unknown force. The editor replied, asking for more concrete evidence and suggesting he focus on community angles instead. Frustrated but persistent, he'd built a simple website on a free hosting platform, uploading his notes, photos, and a video of the kite incident Eli had recorded on his phone. He called it the symmetry anomaly, linking the kite's failure, the tide's uniformity, and the cloud's curvature to possible non-human causes, like the climate cycles of centuries past. He shared the link on X, Reddit, and even emailed it to his school's science department. A colleague, Miss Harrow, the physics teacher, had texted back, "This is wild, Jim. You're onto something, but be careful. You're challenging the narrative." He'd gone further, joining a live Zoom seminar hosted by a lesser-known climate research group. When the conda opened, he unmuted his mic. He described the cloud's curvature, the frequency signals, and the kite experiment, urging the panel to consider non-climate causes, possibly tied to natural cycles like those before industrialization. The moderator cut him off, citing time constraints, but a few attendees messaged him afterward, expressing their intrigue. One, a retired physicist from Oregon, offered to analyze his detector data. Mr. Carter sent it immediately, feeling a flicker of hope. Now he is drafting a letter to a national science magazine, Science Today, summarizing his findings. "I know I'm just a math teacher," he typed, "but the data suggests a coordinated phenomenon, clouds, tides, kites, defying known physics. Earth has seen natural warmings and coolings like the medieval warm period and little ice age, independent of humans. Could this be related? I've attached observations and invite scrutiny." He hesitated, then added, "The global warming narrative is drowning out inquiry. We need to look beyond it." He hit the send, knowing it was a long shot. Eli watched his father, sensing the weight of his efforts. "What if no one listens, Dad? What if they all think it's just global warming?" Carter leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Then we keep digging, Eli. Truth doesn't need a megaphone, it needs persistence. Someone, somewhere will see what we see." He glanced at the frequency detector, its display still spiking intermittently. "Let's try the kite experiment again today. This time, we'll be methodical. 1 commercial kite as a control, and 5 homemade ones, each with a different degree of asymmetry. If the same pattern holds, it'll confirm what we saw at the park." They spent the morning in the basement, crafting kites from spare fabric, wooden dowels, and duct tape. The control kite was a store-bought Delta model, its sleek, symmetrical design a stark contrast to their creations. The 5 homemade kites were deliberately uneven. The first had a slightly off-center tail, the second a lopsided wing, the third a jagged edge on one side, the fourth a heavily skewed frame, and the fifth was a chaotic patchwork of mismatched shapes, barely recognizable as a kite. Eli grinned at the last one, dubbing it the Frankenstein flyer. They stepped into the backyard, the stratus clouds looming overhead, their curved arc sharper today like a lens focusing on Willow Park. Mr. Carter set up the frequency detector, its LEDs blinking as it scanned the sky. Eli launched the control kite first, its symmetrical form catching the breeze with ease. For a moment, it soared smoothly, then it faltered, just like the kites at Willow Park. It spun counterclockwise, dipping erratically before crashing into the grass, its clean lines no match for the mysterious force. Eli frowned, remembering the park. Every symmetrical kite had spiraled out of control, while his lopsided creation had soared effortlessly. One by one, they tested the homemade kites. The first, with its slightly asymmetrical tail, wobbled but held steady, cutting through the air with surprising grace. The second, with its uneven wing, flew even better, its path smooth despite the breeze. The third and fourth, with increasing asymmetry, danced in the sky as if guided by an invisible hand, their odd shapes defying the chaos that had downed the control kite. The fifth, the Frankenstein flyer, was a marvel. Its chaotic, mismatched form should have plummeted, yet it soared higher and straighter than any, untouched by the force that sent the symmetrical kite spinning. Eli's eyes widened, the memory of Willow Park vivid. His own asymmetrical kite had been the only one to thrive when all others failed, as if the anomaly favored imperfection. Mr. Carter's detector surged with each launch, its reading spiking highest when the most asymmetrical kite flew. He scribbled furiously in his notebook, circling the words asymmetry and counterclockwise interference. "It's the same as before, Eli," he said, his voice taut with excitement. "Symmetrical kites fail, spinning counterclockwise, just like at the park, while asymmetrical ones thrive. Whatever's causing this, it's targeting symmetry, disrupting aerodynamics in a way that defies physics as we know it." Eli clutched the string of the Frankenstein flyer, feeling the hum in the air, stronger now, vibrating through the kite. "It's like the sky wants the weird ones to win," he said, half joking. Mr. Carter didn't laugh, his eyes locked on the clouds, their curved arc seeming to pulse faintly. "Maybe it does," he murmured, "and if it's tied to those clouds and the tides, we're closer to proving it's not global warming." Eli's face lit up with an idea. "Dad, what if we make a video of this? Like, show the kites crashing and the weird ones flying. We could put it on YouTube, share it on X, Facebook, everywhere. People would have to see it's real." Mr. Carter paused, then nodded, a spark of hope in his eyes. "That's brilliant, Eli. Visual proof might cut through the noise. Let's do it." They set up Eli's phone on a tripod, capturing the experiment from start to finish. The sleek Delta kite spiraling to the ground, the asymmetrical kites soaring, and Mr. Carter explaining the frequency detector's spikes. Eli narrated, his voice earnest, describing how the Frankenstein flyer defied logic. Carter added a brief explanation of natural climate cycles, noting how the Earth's warmings and coolings, like the medieval warm period and Little Ice Age, showed nature's power to shift without human influence, suggesting the anomalies might stem from a similar force. They edited the footage that evening, keeping it raw but clear, titling it "The Symmetry Anomaly: Kites Reveal a Hidden Force." Mr. Carter uploaded it to YouTube, linking it to his The Symmetry Anomaly website, and shared it on X, Facebook, Reddit, and local community groups, tagging Tide Crisis and Cloud Anomaly. The video exploded, racking up thousands of views in hours, shared across platforms by curious viewers, amateur scientists, and conspiracy enthusiasts. Comments flooded in. "This is wild, something's definitely off with the sky, and natural cycles make sense. Why's everyone stuck on global warming?" But the global warmists struck back hard. Prominent climate activists on X called it dangerous misinformation, accusing the Carters of downplaying human-driven warming by invoking historical cycles. A viral thread from @ClimateCrusader read, "This kite nonsense and talk of old climate cycles distracts from the real crisis. Global warming is flooding our cities. #Tide Crisis." Some comments were harsher, dismissing Mr. Carter as a crackpot teacher, and Eli as a kid playing with toys. Yet the video's view count soared past 1 million, retweeted by a few sympathetic scientists and shared in forums Mr. Carter had never reached. Eli grinned at the laptop screen, watching the numbers climb. "They're mad, Dad, but they're watching." Mr. Carter managed a tired smile, his eyes fixed on the hateful comments, but also on the messages of support from strangers across the globe. "They're listening, Eli. That's a start. Now we keep going, because this is real, and we're going to make them see it." Chapter 4. Mr. Carter sat in the Willow Middle School cafeteria during lunch, the hum of the classroom replaced by the clatter of trays. The events of the viral kite video left him restless, his mind reeling from its spread. As he sat with a half-eaten sandwich, 3 teachers approached his table. Miss Harrow, the physics teacher, and 2 others, Mr. Daniels and Miss Lee, both vocal advocates for man-made global warming. Their expressions were a mix of concern and irritation, their knowledge of his X posts and YouTube video fueling a confrontation. "Jim, we need to talk about that kite video," Miss Harrow began, her voice steady but firm. "It's gone viral, and it's causing a stir. People are questioning the climate crisis because of your symmetry anomaly idea." Mr. Daniels leaned in, his tone sharp. "You're spreading misinformation. The rising tides, the strange clouds, it's all consistent with global warming. Decades of data show human activity is driving this. Your kite experiment doesn't disprove that. It just muddies the waters." Ms. Lee nodded, her eyes narrowing. "The scientific consensus is clear. CO2 emissions, deforestation, industrial output. You're a math teacher, not a climatologist. Suggesting natural cycles like the medieval warm period explain this undermines the urgency. Cities are flooding, Jim. We need action, not distractions. Mr. Carter listened, his fork pausing midair. He wanted to argue, to point to the counterclockwise kite spins, the asymmetrical flyer's resilience, and the frequency detector's spikes, evidence that defied simple climate models. But his mind wasn't on the debate. It wandered to a theory so outlandish he hadn't voiced it, not even to Eli. The idea of a large comet crossed his mind briefly, but he dismissed it. Observatories worldwide, from the James Webb to ground-based telescopes, would have spotted anything causing such effects. No, something more fundamental gnawed at him. He thought of Einstein's space-time, the fabric of the universe where time and space intertwine. What if time itself were unraveling? Not in a biblical end-time sense, but as a scientific anomaly, time shrinking, altering physical laws like aerodynamics and tidal patterns. The uniform tides, the stratus cloud's curvature, the kite's behavior, it could all point to a universe where time was running out, a concept too radical for a lunchroom debate. His silence deepened as the teachers pressed on, their arguments blending into a buzz. He nodded occasionally, feigning agreement, but his thoughts raced. The world might be on the brink of a temporal collapse, and he had no data, no proof, just a hunch that grew stronger with each passing hour. As the bell rang, Miss Harrow touched his shoulder. "Think about it, Jim. We're on the same side, saving the planet." The teachers left, their footsteps echoing, while Mr. Carter sat alone, the weight of his unspoken theory pressing down. He gathered his things, resolving to return to the basement lab, where he and Eli might uncover something, anything to test this wild idea. Chapter 5. The Carter household's basement lab hummed with the faint buzz of a frequency detector, its LEDs flickering on the workbench. The air smelled of burnt toast and solder, a mix of Eli's breakfast and the cluttered chaos of their experiments. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, each second feeling heavier, as if time itself were straining to hold together. 11-year-old Eli sat cross-legged on a stool, munching toast slathered with peanut butter, his eyes locked on his father. Mr. Carter, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the glow of a single bulb, stood before a whiteboard, his hands moving as if unraveling an invisible knot. "Dad, you said it's not global warming, so what's messing with the kites and tides?" Eli asked, crumbs dusting his lap. His voice carried a mix of curiosity and unease, sharpened by the viral kite video's fallout and the world's spiraling panic. Mr. Carter paused, his marker hovering over the whiteboard. He'd barely slept, his mind consumed by a theory so radical it felt like staring into a void. "Eli, it's time itself. Not an object, not a storm, not even the climate. Time is unraveling, breaking down the fabric of space-time." He sketched a grid on the board, lines bending and twisting like a crumpled sheet. Space-time's like this grid. It holds everything together, gravity, motion, the way kites fly or tides rise. If time starts collapsing, shrinking, or warping, the grid gets distorted. Things we take for granted, like how a kite stays aloft or why tides follow the moon, start to break. Eli's eyes widened, toast forgotten. "You mean time's ending?" "Not ending like the world's blowing up," Mr. Carter said, his voice low but urgent. "More like it's contracting, folding in on itself. Imagine time as a rubber band stretched tight for billions of years. If it starts snapping back, everything tied to it, kites, clouds, tides, gets thrown out of whack." He drew jagged ripples across the grid, each one warping the lines. Symmetrical kites crash because their perfect shapes need stable space-time to fly right. Your lopsided Frankenstein flyer? It's chaotic, so it rides those ripples, like a surfer on a wild wave. Eli leaned forward, frowning. "So the clouds and tides, they're messed up because time's all wobbly?" "Exactly," Mr. Carter said, tapping the board. "Those stratus clouds, with that weird, curved center, they've been the only clouds for days. No cumulus, no cirrus, just those flat, lens-like sheets. That curvature's like a scar in space-time, a sign time's folding in a way it shouldn't. The tides, all high and uniform across the globe, ignore the moon's normal pull. And your kites, The symmetrical ones spin counterclockwise like they're caught in a temporal vortex, while the asymmetrical ones glide through it. Space-time's twisting, and it's favoring chaos over order. He turned to the laptop, pulling up a public data feed from the James Webb Space Telescope. He wasn't looking for objects, no comets or mysterious streaks, but for distortions in the cosmos itself. The telescope's infrared scans showed galaxies slightly blurred, their light stretched in ways astronomers hadn't explained. On X, scientists called it a calibration error, but Mr. Carter saw something else, a faint ripple in the background radiation, visible only in the telescope's deepest scans, as if time's collapse was echoing across the universe. "This started the same day as the kite incident," he said, pointing to the screen. "It's not an object, Eli. It's a pattern, a distortion in how light travels, like time's leaving fingerprints on the stars." Eli squinted at the screen, the blurred galaxies like smudged chalk. "So time's breaking everywhere, not just here?" Carter nodded, his fingers tracing the frequency detector's blinking LEDs. The pulses had grown stronger since yesterday, spiking in sync with the stratus cloud's eerie arc overhead. The Earth's seen natural cycles before, warmings like the medieval warm period, coolings like the Little Ice Age, he said. But those were slow, driven by the sun or volcanoes. This is different, fast, precise, like the universe's clock is skipping beats. If time's unraveling, it could mimic those cycles. Tides rising, clouds forming unnaturally, but it's not climate. It's the foundation of physics coming apart. Eli set his toast down, his mind racing. How do we prove it? The video got 1 million views, but people just screamed about global warming or called you nuts. Mr. Carter sighed, rubbing his temples. The viral video had sparked a firestorm on X, climate activists branding him a denialist, conspiracy theorists spinning wild tales, and a few scientists quietly asking for his data. His inbox held hate mail alongside support, including a note from a retired physicist in Oregon who'd found unexplained temporal anomalies in the detector readings. But the global warmist narrative, amplified by media and politicians, drowned out reason. A senator demanded carbon taxes, while the Willow Chronicle ran a headline, "Climate Crisis Escalates. Local Teacher's Kite Stunt Fuels Denialism." "We need hard evidence," Mr. Ralph Carter said, his voice steady. "Something that shows time itself is shifting. The kites and clouds are clues, but we need to measure the temporal distortion directly." He glanced at the workbench, where an old atomic clock from the school's lab surplus glowed faintly. "We'll modify the frequency detector to track temporal fluctuations, changes in how time flows. If we calibrate this clock to measure microsecond differences against a control, we might catch time skipping or stretching." Eli's face lit up. "Like a time machine experiment?" Mr. Carter grinned, a spark of hope in his eyes. "Not quite, but close. We'll use the atomic clock and the detector together, and we'll fly the kites again, your Frankenstein flyer and the others, plus a symmetrical control. We'll attach sensors to track their motion in real time, see if the counterclockwise spins match the detector's spikes or the clock's glitches." Eli hopped off his stool, diving into a box of wires and circuit boards. "Can we use the Frankenstein flyer? It's the champ." "Definitely," Mr. Carter said, pulling his notebook closer and scribbling temporal collapse and space-time ripples. "We'll test all the asymmetrical kites and the control, record everything, video, detector readings, clock data. If we're right, Eli, this could prove the anomalies aren't climate-driven. They're time itself, unraveling the universe." The radio crackled with a news update. Global tidal crisis worsens. Evacuations in Miami, Jakarta, Venice. Scientists urge immediate emissions cuts. Mr. Carter shook his head, muttering, "They're missing it." He glanced at Eli, who was soldering a wire to the detector with surprising skill. "If we can show time's the culprit, not CO2, we might wake them up." Outside, the stratus clouds loomed, their curved centers like cracks in reality. The faint hum in the air pulsed stronger, a whisper of a universe where time was running out. As father and son worked, the weight of their discovery settled over them. A truth too vast for a basement lab, yet too urgent to ignore. Chapter 6. The Carter household's basement lab, once a sanctuary of tinkering and hope, felt like a bunker under siege. Weeks of failed attempts to measure time's slowdown had left the workbench cluttered with broken circuits and abandoned prototypes, the frequency detector's LEDs blinking like a fading heartbeat. Eli sat on his stool, his 11-year-old face drawn, scrolling through X on the laptop. Mr. Carter stood by the whiteboard, its equations now a blur of erased hopes, his wire-rimmed glasses fogged with exhaustion. The world had turned their quest into a punchline, and the weight of it pressed heavy on them both. Mr. Carter's article, The Symmetry Anomaly, Time's Collapse, and the End of Space-Time, had ignited a firestorm. Posted on his website and shared across X, Reddit, and Science Today, it laid out the evidence. Kites failing symmetrically, stratus clouds with curved centers, uniform tides, diagonal rain, silent birds, crashing planes, and drifting GPS systems, all tied to a collapsing space-time, with mathematical proofs rooted in Einstein's field equations hinting at a temporal unraveling. He'd hoped the rigor would spark serious debate, but the global warmists saw it as fresh ammunition. On X, they branded him an end-of-time preacher, no longer just a crackpot teacher, but a doomsday prophet. A viral thread from @ClimateCrusader sneered, "Hey, Pastor Carter, got your apocalypse sign ready?" #timecollapse nonsense. Another user posted a meme of a bearded zealot with Mr. Carter's face, captioned, "The end is near, repent for your kites." News outlets piled on. A CNN anchor, smirking during a segment, quipped, "From kites to the end of time, local teacher's wild theory takes denialism to cosmic levels." A BBC pundit called it a math teacher's sci-fi fantasy, while the Willow Chronicle ran a scathing op-ed. Carter's end-of-time claims distract from real climate solutions. The mockery stung, but it was the comments aimed at Eli, calling him the kid with the toy kite, that cut deepest. Eli's eyes glistened as he read them, his voice barely a whisper. "They think we're a joke, Dad, all that work and they just laugh." Mr. Carter knelt beside him, his own heart heavy. "I know, Eli. It hurts when people twist your truth into a caricature." He forced a smile, but inside, depression gnawed. Nights spent poring over equations, days dodging snickers from colleagues at Willow Middle School, it felt like shouting into a void. The global warmist narrative, amplified by fear and politics, drowned out their evidence. He'd begun to doubt himself, wondering if he'd dragged his son into a futile fight. Then Eli gasped, pointing at the laptop. "Dad, look!" An email from Nature, the prestigious journal, glowed on the screen. They'd published Mr. Carter's article, including his mathematical excursion, tying the anomalies to the collapse of space-time. The editor's note praised its provocative clarity, calling it a bold hypothesis warranting further study. More stunning, the Goddard Institute for Space Studies, known for climate research but open to bold ideas, had invited Mr. Carter to present his findings at a symposium. "Your work challenges conventional frameworks," the invitation read, "and we believe it merits discussion, even if it diverges from our climate focus." Eli's face lit up, the first real smile in weeks. "They believe you, Dad. They're listening." Mr. Carter read the email again, his chest loosening. Vindication wasn't the word. He didn't care about proving the global warmist wrong. "It's not about being right, Eli," he said, his voice steady. "It's about uncovering the truth, no matter how wild it sounds. If we help even one person see what's happening, time unraveling, not just warming, that's enough. We're doing this for humanity, not for applause." Eli nodded, his disappointment replaced by a flicker of pride. "So what now? Do we keep building stuff?" Mr. Carter chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "We keep observing, keep questioning. The planes crashing, the GPS drifting, the birds going quiet, the rain falling diagonally. It's all real, Eli. Nature's backing us, and Goddard's giving us a stage. We'll keep pushing, even if it's just you and me in this basement." As they spoke, a sharp ping broke the quiet, an X post lighting up the laptop screen. It was from one of Mr. Carter's fiercest critics, at Sky Skeptic. "Hey, Pastor, what's next? Shouting the end is near on a street corner? #timecollapse joke." The words cut deep, but instead of shrinking, Mr. Carter felt a flicker of resolve ignite within him. His hands moved steadily across the keys. "I'm not a preacher," he wrote, "but maybe they're right too in their own way. The end of time could be closer than we think. Look at the signs. Wars raging everywhere, famine in a world overflowing with food, hatred growing like a virus. The planet is spiraling towards self-destruction. Maybe we will soon reach the end of time, one way or the other." He hit send. He knew it wouldn't change the skeptic's mind, but maybe it would plant a seed. Outside, the stratus clouds stretched low and strange, their curved centers like fractures in the sky itself. The air thrummed with a pulse that didn't belong, an invisible signal of a world slipping off its axis. Planes veered off course. GPS systems blinked erratically, birds perched in motionless clusters, and rain fell sideways, though the air stood still. Inside the lab, father and son sat shoulder to shoulder, no longer alone. The world might scoff, but the truth was breaking through, one ripple at a time. Chapter 7. The email had arrived 2 weeks ago, but now a formal letter followed, on thick paper with the insignia of nature embossed in silver at the top. It confirmed what Mr. Carter already knew. He and Eli had been invited to present their findings at the first global symposium of independent researchers, Unresolved Frontiers in Space-Time, specifically in a session devoted to groundbreaking amateur discoveries. The letter included details about presentation slots, submission deadlines, and a note of encouragement. For those who are asking questions the mainstream has not yet learned to ask, it felt less like an honor and more like a challenge. For months, Mr. Carter and Eli had chased an idea most dismissed as science fiction. That time itself, not just relative time, but absolute time, might be changing. Not ticking slower in space or faster on Earth's surface, but actually thinning, like a resource being used up. They believed the universe might be approaching a temporal edge, a point where time begins to run out. The problem was clear. How do you measure something if you're stuck inside the thing you're trying to measure? Atomic clocks, pulsar rhythms, entropy, all relied on internal comparisons. To truly measure whether time was becoming scarce, you'd have to observe from outside the universe. And that was impossible. That's when Mr. Carter saw the video. It was late one night, and he was scanning his usual feed of physics talks and niche lectures when a Chalk Talk video caught his eye. The title mentioned a discovery by a computer scientist named Ryan Williams, something about squeezing space into time, a space-time trade-off. Intrigued, he clicked. The video clearly explained a bold idea, that you could trade space memory for time in certain kinds of computations. If you don't have enough space to solve a big problem, Ryan Williams demonstrated, you can still do it if you're willing to spend more time. It was called a time-space trade-off, and Ryan had found a way to squeeze space into time, a revolutionary discovery in computer theory. But as Mr. Carter watched, a new question formed in his mind. What happens if time itself is running out? What would happen to Williams' experiment then? Mr. Carter hypothesized that if time was becoming scarce, if absolute time was truly thinning, then this kind of experiment could detect it, maybe even measure it. Because if time is being depleted, then not only is space limited, like having a small table, but time itself is also shrinking. And when both time and space are constrained, the whole structure of computation, and perhaps the universe, starts to strain. Williams' method offered a sensitive, measurable window into that strain. Eli watched his dad run the same program over and over, eyes flicking between a high-precision timer and the line graph growing on his screen. Nothing ever seemed to change, until you looked very, very close. Finally, Eli tugged on Mr. Carter's sleeve. "Dad, what are you really doing?" Mr. Carter smiled. "Let me show you something," he said, motioning Eli over to the workbench. He grabbed a whiteboard marker and drew 2 tables, a big one and a small one. "Let's say you have a massive jigsaw puzzle," he began, "and a big table, like our dining table. You can spread all the pieces out and solve it pretty fast." He pointed to the big table. "Now imagine you only have this tiny side table. You can still solve the puzzle, but you'll have to do it a little at a time. Look at a few pieces, put them back, check a few more. It takes longer." Eli nodded. "So the puzzle takes more time." Exactly. That's the genius of a scientist named Ryan Williams. He proved that even if your computer doesn't have much memory, like a small table, it can still solve really big problems if you let it take more time to think. Eli looked at the computer screen. "So what are you doing with it?" "I'm running Ryan's idea, his space-saving puzzle-solving code," Mr. Carter said. Except instead of taking hours or minutes, it finishes in about 90 microseconds. That's 90 millionths of a second. Eli's eyebrows shot up. That fast? Yes, but here's the weird part. The same program, same computer, same everything. But every day, the runtime increases. First 90.1 microseconds, then 90.3, then 90.6. He pulled up a chart. The orange line was climbing ever so slowly while the blue reference line stayed flat. I checked the hardware, flawless. I replaced the power supply. Nothing changed. So why is it taking longer? Eli asked. Mr. Carter looked him in the eye. Because time is stretching. Eli blinked. Like the clock is wrong? No, the clock is fine. But what the clock measures, really absolute time, that's thinning, slowing, draining, like syrup on a plate, getting thinner and thinner. Eli stared at the microsecond graph. He remembered the tides coming in late, his asymmetric kite flying straight when the symmetric ones were struggling to stay aloft, the way birds seemed confused and tired in the sky. You think this proves it? I think Ryan Williams gave us the tool, Mr. Carter said. A puzzle that finishes in 90 microseconds when time is normal. But when the puzzle starts taking 91, 92, 94, then it's not the code that's changing. He tapped the orange line. It's time itself. Maybe we are really approaching the end of time, and it's starting to become scarce. Space-time is changing. The universe is changing. Time is shrinking. Chapter 8. The symposium was scheduled for mid-July to be held in Georgia. Mr. Carter and his young assistant Eli had their presentation prepared to the letter. The core of it was a clear, concise visual journey through their observations, the slowly lengthening runtimes, the strange atmospheric phenomena, and the anomalies in nature that had raised the first red flags. They would present the experimental results of their simulations based on Ryan Williams's time-space trade-off model. He had included pages of mathematical calculations tucked neatly into a separate section of his notes, enough to satisfy any technically curious minds. But those equations weren't for public display. The presentation would be simple, visual, and approachable. The message was what mattered. Time might be running out. The Carters decided to make it a family trip. Mr. Carter, his wife Josephine, Eli, and his younger sister Lisa packed into the car and took a 2-week vacation together around the symposium. Georgia in July was warm and lush. Their stay was terrific, filled with museums, riverside walks, and southern cooking. In the evenings, they curled up in their hotel room as a family, watching old and new TV shows together. Green Acres, The Andy Griffith Show, Young Sheldon, a mix of past and present, laughter and comfort. On the day of the presentation, the room filled quickly. Scientists, educators, journalists, and a few curious hobbyists packed in shoulder to shoulder. Mr. Carter's calm delivery and Eli's sharp timing caught everyone's attention. Their slides were clean and compelling. Their theory was bold. Afterward, the room buzzed. People approached with questions, encouragement, and stories of strange data from their own disciplines. Mr. Carter made friends that day. People who, like him, weren't afraid to look past the obvious. On the way back home, just outside the resort, they passed a group of young evangelical Christians singing gospel songs with energy and joy. They seemed genuinely happy, their music rising like sunlight. One of the young women from the group smiled and walked over, offering them a pamphlet. It read, "The end of times is near." Mr. Carter glanced at Eli, then at Josephine. With a half smile, he took the pamphlet from her. "I believe so too." He said, "The end of times is near, one way or the other."